Imagine walking into a temple over 800 years old and seeing, carved in stone, the clear image of a dinosaur. Not a dragon, not a mythical beast, but something that looks exactly like a Stegosaurus. Centuries before modern science even used the word dinosaur. And what if this wasn't the only clue? Across different parts of the world, there are carvings, sculptures, and even bones suggesting that humans and dinosaurs may have walked side by side. But how could that be possible? In the heart of Angkor, Cambodia, there's a temple that seems to have been swallowed by the jungle, Prohm. Its walls, built in the 12th century, are now intertwined with massive roots that creep into the stone as if trying to reclaim what once belonged to nature. The setting feels straight out of an adventure movie, and it's no surprise it has been used as a filming location for famous productions. But there's something here that has puzzled archaeologists, tourists, and mystery hunters for decades. Among the hundreds of carvings etched into the columns and walls, there is one that completely breaks the pattern. It doesn't show warriors, dancers, or deities, but a creature with a robust body, short tail, and a row of plates running along its back. For anyone even vaguely familiar with paleontology, the resemblance is instant. It looks remarkably like a Stegosaurus. The striking detail? This carving was made over 600 years before. The world even knew the word dinosaur, coined only in 1842, and centuries before any Stegosaurus fossil was identified by modern science. How could that be possible? Some explanations try to downplay the mystery. Maybe it's just a common animal, like a boar or a chameleon, carved with decorative elements that coincidentally resemble the dinosaur's plates. Others suggest the plates could simply be stylized leaves in the background, creating an illusion. But others see something far more unsettling: the possibility that the temple's builders had knowledge of creatures extinct for millions of years, or even more intriguing, that they might have unseen them aunts. And that leads to an unavoidable question. If they truly observed something resembling a Stegosaurus, how? Could the knowledge of ancient peoples have been far greater than we imagine? Or is our timeline of life on Earth incomplete? In the Peruvian desert of Ica lies one of the most controversial collections in unconventional archaeology, the so-called Ica Stones. Thousands of andesite rocks, a dark, extremely hard volcanic stone, have been found in farms, caves, and riverbeds across the region. What makes them intriguing isn't the material, but the images carved into them. Some depict ordinary scenes like fishermen or hunters, but others show something that shouldn't be there: humans interacting with dinosaurs. There are carvings of men riding giant reptiles, fighting against long-necked creatures, or performing complex surgeries while a dinosaur rests nearby. The first reaction from many scholars was straightforward: fraud. After all, science tells us dinosaurs vanished about 65 million years ago, long before the first humans ever appeared. But the story didn't end there. Peruvian doctor Javier Cabrera Darquea, who became famous for studying and collecting these stones, insisted that part of the collection was genuine. According to him, the carvings were made by a very ancient civilization with advanced knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and that apparently had encountered these creatures. It's true that some stones were admittedly produced by local artisans to sell to tourists, which tainted the credibility of the discovery. But a lesser-known detail is that there are pieces with no clear commercial origin found before the boom of fakes, and they still have no convincing explanation. If these stones are authentic, they rewrite everything we know about the history of life on Earth. And what if the fakes were created precisely to discredit a genuine archaeological find? Looking at these images, what would your conclusion be? In 1944, in the small town of Acámbaro, Mexico, a local merchant named Waldemar Julsrud made a discovery that still sparks debate today. While riding his horse near a hill called El Toro, he stumbled upon small clay figures partially buried in the soil. Intrigued, he hired local workers to excavate the site. What they unearthed was astonishing. Over 30,000 ceramic pieces, many depicting people, animals, and something completely unexpected: dinosaurs. There were figures of giant reptiles with crests, long necks, massive tails, and even scenes of humans riding or interacting with these creatures. The sculptures were three-dimensional, with details strikingly similar to modern scientific reconstructions, yet made decades before paleontology had popularized such imagery. The reaction from the scientific community was predictable. They accused Julsrud of fraud, claiming that the figures were crafted by local artisans to deceive collectors. However, certain details have kept the controversy alive. Thermoluminescence tests conducted in the 1970s suggested that some of the pieces could be centuries or even millennia old. Other tests, however, yielded more recent dates, adding even more confusion. For those who believe in their authenticity, the question is simple: how could an isolated community produce thousands of figures with such precise anatomical details of extinct animals without access to fossils or specialized literature? For skeptics, the answer is just as simple: creativity and a desire to profit from foreign collectors. Yet the sheer number, variety, and consistency of the figures continue to raise questions. Could the Acámbaro figures be one of the greatest archaeological hoaxes of the century, or an uncomfortable piece of evidence that humans and dinosaurs once walked the earth together? In almost every ancient culture, there are stories of immense creatures covered in scales, with sharp teeth and wings capable of sweeping across the sky. In China, dragons were symbols of power and wisdom. In medieval Europe, they were feared monsters, guardians of treasures, and enemies of heroes. Indigenous peoples of the Americas also told legends of flying serpents and giant reptiles that lived in rivers or deep lakes. What's curious is that, despite the distances and cultural differences, these descriptions have something in common. They all bear a striking resemblance to the creatures we now call dinosaurs. Some researchers suggest that these myths may have arisen when ancient peoples found fossils, imagining they were the bones of monsters still alive. Others go further and wonder, what if dragons are simply a cultural way of preserving, through stories, real encounters with prehistoric animals? And remember, the term dinosaur only appeared in 1842. Before that, any trace of a giant reptile could only be described using the language of the time, and the word dragon was perfect for it. Were the legends inspired by creatures our ancestors actually knew, or were they merely products of imagination, shaped by fear and admiration for something that never existed? Perhaps the answer lies hidden in ruins, in stones, and in memories that refuse to disappear. Among temples swallowed by the jungle, carved stones and hand-shaped figures, remains an enigma that science has yet to fully close. Perhaps they are coincidences. Perhaps they are skillfully crafted hoaxes. Or maybe fragments of a story far older than we can imagine. What is certain is that, from the very beginning, humanity has carried an almost instinctive fascination for giant, mysterious creatures. And that fascination has crossed generations, continents, and cultures. If humans and dinosaurs once walked the same earth, we may never have definitive proof, but the marks, in stones, in stories, and in the collective imagination, remain, challenging what we think we know. And you? Do you believe our ancestors actually saw these creatures? Or is it all just a misinterpretation of the past? If you want to keep exploring the mysteries time has tried to hide, subscribe, because this is just one of the stories the world still cannot explain.